Drum roll! Yesterday we hit our goal of 4 million subscribers. You guys really are the best. But now, as promised, onto my annual New Year's post. It's the 2nd, so you got to give me credit for getting it in before Good Friday.
We are talking about the home invasion horror movie, They Are Inside. This one is directed and co-written by Jean-Paul Pallini. And it kind of takes elements from the movie The Strangers, I would say, mixed with funny games. So what we have these two sisters who have had a traumatic childhood, and they are making a movie about their kind of experiences, and they kind of enlist the help of a small group of kind of friends and a couple of actors to essentially tell the story. And they've gone in this kind of like isolated cabin to film this this movie. However, whilst they are there, they are menaced by two strangers outside who are wearing these kind of like anime sort of style old school doll masks. And they have murderous intent. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss They Are Inside. Very, very reminiscent of The Strangers. So much so that I feel this movie will just be looked at as a kind of a rip-off version to a certain degree. And it is a fair comparison, if I'm being completely honest. But what does work for me in this movie? So the first thing I would say, this is kind of a found footage movie, so it does take a somewhat a different slant on the genre to a certain degree. So there is that. There's also some particularly kind of gruesome deaths on scene. So this movie doesn't actually shy away from a lot of the kind of the on-screen kills, and I feel that they are done with a good effects here. There's some quite realistic looking kind of practical effects, and the kills do look kind of quite brutal. And there is an element here of trying to kind of make the movie something more than just a random kind of a killing. It tries to have an attempt at having a little bit more kind of going on, a little bit more kind of to it in regards to the psychology with kind of both victims and predators. In fact, the movie is actually cut with scenes of kind of predator and prey wildlife kind of clips to kind of demonstrate that. I personally didn't like that editing choice, but you know, it's obviously there to kind of underscore that message. The acting I didn't think was too bad here from all the cast. I thought they did a pretty decent job in regards to kind of portraying the sort of characters. And yeah, it's the movie isn't afraid to kind of like you say, it's fairly gory death. There's also a quite extended full frontal nudity scene here, so you know. There is, it's fairly kind of like a lot going on in both violence and kind of like, you know, sexual violence to a certain degree. So what doesn't work for me? So this movie is very, very derivative of, I would say, primarily the Strangers, but also, you know, the funny games like I've mentioned. So it doesn't seem particularly original, and the elements that it does try to do that maybe would set apart this movie from the aforementioned films, I don't think work particularly well. This movie just seems to have a lot of artificial inflated drama for the sake of kind of padding out the kind of the running time. At least that's how it comes across to me as an audience member. The movie, the bulk of the running time really consists of people arguing, and I do see this a lot in horror films. In actual fact, essentially all of the kind of the second act of this movie and some of the first and some of the third is more or less just kind of people arguing and kind of getting in spats with each other, and it just feels like artificial drama to kind of like pad out running time ultimately. And the movie becomes a little bit dull because of this, and ultimately I feel the characters become a little bit unlikable. I don't think they're necessarily badly acted, but the characters that you see on screen, particularly are kind of our main two sisters, and really I guess our main one, played by Karli, I don't know, it just seems a little bit unlikable, so you don't really kind of root for them. And I didn't really kind of there's a kind of a prologue at the beginning of the movie about the YouTubers I thought was quite fun, but it kind of, I don't know, almost undercuts the kind of the main bulk of the story to a certain degree, I felt. And it just is a little bit of a kind of seen it before. The new elements that this movie tries to do, I don't think work particularly well. I feel the trying to have a bit more kind of cerebral goings on, and the kind of the motivations and the kind of like the context about what's happening, I don't feel works very well. It's not a compelling narrative, and I don't think it's told in a particularly kind of compelling way. So ultimately this movie becomes somewhat kind of convoluted, somewhat kind of dull, but nonetheless there are some kind of like some gory scenes here. There are some sort of some shocking, some shocking violent deaths, but I don't feel it does a good job either in kind of really having much tension. There's The Strangers, for example. If we compare that to that film does have a real kind of a sense of unease. It's a scary film. When you see these characters that come out the dark, it's a frightening feeling. There's none of that with this film. This film misses all of that in favour of kind of psychobabble. So I don't think this movie hits the mark, in my personal opinion. You may disagree, but obviously please feel free to voice your opinion. So for me, this movie was a little bit of a missing the mark, but there are elements here I feel that may appeal to certain people. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me comments, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.